manual report.
Oh yeah, I just can't find my glasses at the moment, James. That's going to give me a little bit of problem reading.
Do you have it covered?
Yeah, I looked in everywhere. I put it in here, so they've slipped out on the lawn or something.
I think we're on film.
Okay, everybody. So I'd like to welcome everyone to this formal regional council meeting, and we have one visitor. Look at that, from our own team. Lonely in the galleries there. Mr. Mohi, would you please open our meeting for us?
I hoka huri mātou ki a koe I tēnei ata. Mana ki te ao mātou hui ki te kōrero ngā mea pāna ki te tai ao. Mea ngā mona I te taha. No reira pā ko te tumana ko te ngākau. Ka tai te rangi mai re ki a mātou ki rongi tēnei tumomo kōrero. Koe nei mea ka pātai ki rongi te ngoi kurati aka ke amen.
Thank you very much. Do we have any apologies? We do not. We have a full complement today. So we'll move on. Notices, Councillor Dick.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request leave of absence for a little while, possibly, well, for a few weeks, because I'm going to have this knee fixed next week. Possibly I should ask for leave of absence for November, but I'd hope to be back before then.
Thank you very much. We'll note that. We also better note that I will be requesting a leave of absence for most of November and December.
The Deputy Chair cast votes on behalf of both.
And, we might be able to Skype you in, Alan. I'm going to Skype try and do that, and if you want to do that, we'll just see as we go.
Certainly want to keep getting the agendas and things.
Yeah.
And
so everything is as is.
I will be making sure that the Deputy Chair of Transport is fully briefed with Anne today. He did the job for us yesterday.
Thank you. Any other notices?
Yeah, 15th of November in Wellington, sorry.
Okay. So just to follow that notification, so the Deputy Chair will be taking over formal chair duties, but I'm going to endeavour to try and come back for crucial ones, which James and I are working on at the moment. But nevertheless, Rick will still chair those meetings, so November and December meetings. Okay, any other notices? Do we have to move to accept the notices? Yes, we do, probably. No, we don't. Okay, any conflict of interests? There are none. Confirmation of the last minutes for the 27th. I'm going to assume that they were read. It's quite extensive. Is there any adjustments for corrections on those minutes? If there are none, do we have anyone to move the minutes are correct, accurate record? Don't all jump at once. Councillor Wilson moves, second up. Councillor Balford moved and seconded. All those in favour to confirm the minutes on the 27th? All right, moved. Follow-ups from the previous council meeting. Does anyone have any comment there? I had one, James. That cost for oil and gas, the stakeholder. Did we come up with a costing for that? What we thought that was going to cost?
So no, that is going to be provided at the RPC when the initial.
Yeah, I know it is.
Yeah. So as I understand it, part of the issue with this is that we need to undertake the initial engagement with the key stakeholder groups to get a sense of the nature of the process that they are anticipating. And one of the options with the plan change is whether you do pre-consultation prior to formal notification, and we'll get a sense once we've met with some of the key stakeholders around the nature of the process that will be required. There are greater legal risks with doing it more lightly and more quickly, And once we've engaged particularly the oil and gas sector and get a better sense of their position on the issue, we'll be in a better position to calibrate what the cost of the process is likely to involve.
Thank you. Debbie?
Dates, James. I understood the meetings were going to be September, October, and I haven't been able to track the dates down through the comms team at all.
For the oil and gas stakeholder engagement, I'll come back to you on that. I need to follow up. I'm not sure what's happened there.
Paul? Tom?
Just regarding the second item on the tank process, in discussing the agenda for the Environment and Services Committee meeting yesterday, we sort of came to we discussed the fact that at various times councillors have asked for more information or to be kept more abreast of what's going on with the tank process, and so we were discussing whether to make that a part of the Environment and Services Committee agenda, or given that much of it is ultimately in the context of a plan change and the RPC needs those briefings, whether we would just, so we didn't repeat a lot of things, just provide that kind of updating in the RPC meeting. And so I guess I just want to take the opportunity to question whether councils are happy with that or feel that there needs to be a separate occasional briefing of this group via the Environment Committee. Any views on?
RPC, Tom.
Pardon?
RPC.
You're happy with the RPC? No objections, that's the way we'll proceed.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay,
Okay.
all right, thanks.
Just,
Peter.
just in terms of the follow-ups here, the one that deals with the consideration of Maori constituencies, I wonder, as part of our considerations, I think we're going to have a workshop or discussion on it coming up. Wondering if we can have some information on what's happening in other councils, regional councils around the country, and how many of them actually have an equivalent of an RPC. So whether there's any comparisons we can draw.
So there is no workshop intended. There is a special council meeting to make a decision, but your point's a good one, so we'll ensure that the decision paper going to that committee meeting includes some context around other national circumstances.
So that's not on the workshop today, I guess. It's pretty hot. Yeah, Neil. No. Okay. We'll move on from the follow-ups. There's no, so we don't have to prove the follow-ups, do we? No, we do. Well, can we have someone to move to see the follow-up?
Just before we do, Chair, I'm just looking on the NZTA website now. They went to that briefing last night, and there is information here about the Manawatu Gorge. If anyone's interested, I was going to do it as a minor item, but I won't bother. But just to give everyone a heads up, if you do migrate to the NZTA webpage, if you are interested, they can help you with the final four options, and then the process they would now have to go through to determine which is going to be their preferred outcome. But it is critical for council, port, etc. So it'd be good if councillors did basically understand what was happening.
The four options, the four major options.
I'm happy to move, Chair.
Okay, we move it. Seconder. Peter jumped to the gun. We have a mover and a seconder to accept the follow-ups. All those in favour? All right, we'll move on. Thank you very much. Call for minor items. You don't want to use that one now, Fenton. Rick?
I'd like to have my item, it's corrections and what
Yeah. The other? Paul?
Tūtera update and the Joint Committee on Drinking Water.
And drinking water. Neil?
Just before accepting it, I wonder if I could ask James if the workshop this afternoon will include consideration of new government policies, particularly in forestry.
We haven't provided any formal advice, but given that some of what we'll be talking about is relevant, then we can certainly have a discussion about that. I think and that would be the appropriate time to do it, I think.
Okay. Peter? You endangered species. Why don't you just put endangered species? Whitebait. Oh, God. Just because you... he can't catch any. That's his... Mike, you got
So the late items, are they, we were number 14 on the agenda. Just late item, statement by the Ko Pātiki Kaumātua at the Maori meeting regarding water conservation order.
We'll just bring that as a business on the agenda, Mike.
Okay.
That's a goodie, mate. Ko Pātiki. Ko Pātiki. Ko Pātiki. Okay, Mr. Moore. Thank you. Thanks for raising that. Very important statement they made. Okay, so we have quite a few. It'll take us quite a while. 5. Okay. Thank you very much. Decision items. We're going to item 6, which is adoption of the count. So, James, should be.
Yeah.
Jess.
Thank you, Chair. Manton is going to come up and just talk us through any of the any questions on the adoption of the audited report. And everybody should have, does everybody have a copy of the auditor's report, the independent auditor's report from Audit New Zealand? Apologies for it not being in the agenda. We received it very, very late, last minute, about half an hour ago. So sailing a little bit close to the wind there, but we did get it through in time. So apologies if you haven't had time to read it yet.
Right.
Do you want to just say, what are the salient points, man?
I will jump straight to those.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a process we're at the end of, and granted we are almost 4 months through the next year. It's a bit of a process. So you've had a couple of chances to see the annual report, once when we approved it for audits, and it's been through the FAR committee as well. And now is your final chance to have a look through. There's just 3 areas which have changed since that first time you saw it. One is the write-off of the advances to HBRIC, which we talked about at that meeting. So that's the pretty much the 14 million that has come off the balance sheet there as our assets. It's been written off. The second is our evaluation costs for the RWSS, which is along that same note, so costs that we had been capitalising as we had been reviewing those decisions. So that's 831,000 is also written off during the year, which you can see on the P&L. And the last one is that we now have all the HBRIC figures and for our group accounts. So there's an extra couple of lines there on all the financials which incorporate HBRIC and the port. And so those are the 3 big changes. Hopefully you've all been pretty much kept up to date with those, so there are no surprises there. And our audit report, which we just received, they like keeping us on our toes. So this is very similar to last year. So we've got a clean bill of health for most of what we do. And then the one issue they do have is the valuation that has been put on the intangible in HBRIC, which has come through to our group accounts. So that's the write-down that they made. They left 7.8 million on the books as the value of those intangible assets after going through that process. Audit, while happy with the process, cannot guarantee that that's the value of that asset. So they've got a qualified opinion in that in the report they've given. So that was their one proviso. So that, in a nutshell, is what's going on with the annual report.
That's fair enough too, I think. Peter.
Can I just raise a question in relation to that, Manton? On page 11 of our papers, under number 10, it's got 10.2 issue write-off of shareholder advances, and it says that we've written off the total amount of 13.9 mil.
Yes.
And then the next page, under number 14, some other figures are given about the impairment of the HBRIC accounts, showing that the impairment is 11.74, leaving a value of 7.83. So if I add the 11 and the 7, I get like 19 million.
Yes.
But back on the previous page, we're talking about a total impairment of 13.9.
Cool.
So what's not showing here is the contributions that have been made from MPI, I think, and Crown Irrigation Investments Limited. And for clarity, I wonder if there's some way of including that information so that people aren't confused about the two sets of figures, one being 20 million and one being 14 odd.
I just might leap in here because I don't think that's actually correct, Councillor. The $7 odd million worth of contribution from central government over time has not been added to the overall the starting book value of 20. The missing between the 14 and the 20, or the 13.9 to the 19.5, I think it actually is close to $6 million of additional debt, which HBRIC still hold. So that's bank debt, which, so we are talking about different numbers there. So the 14 million was the advance, so it was booked as an asset. We've now written all of that off on the basis it's not coming back. Separate to that, there was a $20 million overall value of the asset held by HBRIC, which has been written down to the 7.8 that it is now.
So in fact, the total investment was well more than $20 million. If you
Total expenditure on the scheme, as I understand, was in the order of $28 million, including central government's contributions. That's correct.
So, Chair, could I just add to that? The point that Councillor Bevan made is that the numbers in themselves, to a reader coming to it fresh, don't make sense and it can be confusing. And I'd take his request to be that could we give some explanation around that so that people can make the numbers add up.
That's what I'm asking.
So you know about bank debt and other things which other people who read them don't see. So you read those things, it just doesn't make sense. Okay, so you help it?
That's right. Some was an advance, some was a loan, and some was from external sources, which I don't think we're responsible to report on, but you could do as an overall.
So both person coming to read the accounts, we've got to be open with it, so just helps them understand it.
So it's probably worth mentioning they are two separate transactions. So we wrote our debt off, that's fine. They might, in another world, have left that asset as the full value of 20. They are two separate transactions, so just because we wrote ours off didn't mean they had to write that down, but they chose to, that value is no longer 20. They've come to a figure of 7.7. That figure may have been 2 or 0, really. Could have been anything. So they are two separate transactions, so I think that's worth noting. But we'll see if we can word something there that makes that clearer.
Chair?
Yes.
On the auditor's report, it's lamentable that it's come so late. And it's also lamentable that on page 3 we get down to the bottom, misstatements. And they have this big thing about misstatements and omissions, all very good. And it goes on, but it doesn't actually tell you with any degree of particularity that there were no misstatements or they found some.
Halfway through the bottom paragraph on that page.
What do you mean? About
Misstatements.
Yeah. So I read that and I went along through, well, where do we get told what happened to the misstatements? They've got a big thing on the alert for misstatements, which are blah, blah, blah. And then where do they come to and say, well, we hunted them down, but we never found any, or we found some, what are they?
I can confirm that there are none. If there were, they would have mentioned what they were. But I do take your point that it would have been nice to say that. Yeah.
Councillor, just to be fair, on page 2, under the report on the disclosure requirements, they do report that we have complied with the schedules in the Act, and also that we've made disclosures about our performance, which represent a complete list of required disclosures and accurately reflects the information drawn from our information. So I guess that's as close as we get to a statement within there that they are accurate and we haven't made misstatements.
I get that, but when you read a report, you see that, and then it goes on to come on to the next page, tells you about misstatements, and then I'm just saying the structure of the letter, in my view, is not very good. Gives a big talk about misstatements, and it's got my pulse rate going up, my blood pressure rising, but it then doesn't tell me what happened in the end, you know? I just think it's regrettable.
We're doing a bit of feedback for the auditors anyway,
Yeah.
so we'll do that.
Identified snarks, said we're going hunting for them, but never told us what happened.
They definitely hunted for them, I can guarantee you that.
Tell us what happened.
All right. Are there any other questions? Otherwise, I would like to move that the recommendations. A question? Sorry, Debbie.
Just wondering, when you're signing off the statement of compliance and responsibility, and is it normal that the CFO signs it off as well? James, I would have just thought it would be the chair and the chief executive.
I think it's been past practice that the CFO has as well, and I think that would be fairly normal in a statement of accounts.
Yeah.
Yep.
The CFO doesn't have to, you're right, but we have done it in the past, and also they initial each page, which Jess is looking forward to. I think that's why they're on that page, so that James doesn't have to initial each page, but yeah.
Oh, so this is a labour-saving device for James.
That's very sensible.
Neil.
I wonder if the chief executive could identify the very substantial increase in port director fees for the 1 year to the next. Can you help me there? There's a leap from $1,064,000 to $2.7 million of fees. Can you help me there?
It won't be just directors.
Company directors and chief executive.
What page are you on?
That's on page 142.
So I couldn't give the member a definitive breakdown on any of those, but obviously the remuneration includes both the company directors and the chief executive, and there is likely to be a performance element in the chief executive's remuneration, which is likely to be indexed to the performance of the company, which has been above forecast and profitability in recent times. So I would anticipate that that is what that reflects, not the line item underneath. So yeah, 1 million to 2.7. They are matters which we would need to take up with HBRIC in the first instance, and seek an explanation from the port as well. That presumably does include HBRIC directors as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Yes. And if there was a bit of a crossover with Andrew Blair, so there's a little bit of an increase there.
This is Andrew.
Most of Andrew's.
Well, I mean,
yep.
Maybe it should be an issue raised with the port, particularly in relation to this year's dividend.
Mm. So yes, but as Manton points out, it's also an HBRIC issue as well, and may well be that that there's a significant contribution in here from particularly the chief executive of HBRIC's salaries, with 2 individuals in that last year. What we'll do is we'll get some information to councillors with a bit of a breakdown of what's in there, and provide that to you.
The introduction that was part of the staple group that went out to us, that is superseded by this one that's handed out today?
That's correct.
Totally superseded?
That's correct, totally superseded.
All right. I certainly wasn't happy with this. The original saying moves towards regional oil and gas prohibition was strongly supported by councillors. What's said here is I can accept, although I prefer the word strongly to be taken out.
So that original version, councillor, was not drafted either by the chair or myself. It was drafted for us, and what you now have in front of you is something which I penned particularly last week.
On the Chair and Chief Executive's introduction, it would be remiss of me if I didn't go back to the point I made before. I think there should be two separate statements, one from the Chief Executive as the Executive Officer, the other from the Chair on behalf of governors. I don't think it's actually good practice to combine the two. I think there are two quite separate stories to be told. And secondly, I note that yet again, the Chief Executive is to the left and the Chair is to the right, and one is the thing that the Chair is the head of this organisation, and a signature should be in the prime place. I think it sends the wrong message the way it's around the other way.
I certainly have no objection to reversing the order, and I'm happy to defer to the chair in terms of his preference in that regard. Look, in terms of the content, look, I'd just make the observation that it would be reasonably arbitrary, I think, to try and split the content between the chair and the chief executive's narratives, if you like, given that it does cover the totality of the council's headline operations and major events for the year. But I'm happy to take guidance from the chair if he would like to recast this into two blocks.
Mr. Chairman, I've had experience with doing a separate report with, well, Mayor and Chief Executive, and to be honest, it was very difficult to say different things. You're basically repeating yourselves. So I don't see any problem with it.
I'll think about it. Any other questions? Then I'll move the two recommendations, although I'm happy to move the second recommendation as well, but I think the value of those assets is a little bit higher than that, given consideration, recent discussions.
There is a full revaluation next year.
Okay, so let's just say this is a point in time. The world has changed. Do I have a seconder to accept these accounts?
Sorry, Chair, are you doing that subject to further confirmation of the Chair and Chief Executive's introduction?
We can do, actually. Yeah, let's do that. No?
We can't really, because that's what the
We need-
auditors have audited.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would need to be another meeting if we don't.
No, let's just go with it. Thanks for Rick's comment though, and I have some sympathies with it. So next time we may do it a bit differently, but the auditors signed off on this. No, you're shaking your head.
I'm just, yeah, no, happy with that. I understand we're locked on the thing, but I have a view, I still hold to it, and I simply don't accept that they are inseparable jobs for which we cannot have a different story to be told. Do not accept that.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour of accepting recommendations 1 and 2 to accept our accounts? Aye. Against? It is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Put the hefty file over there. Okay, item 7. Establish a proxy for the HBRIC. I just wonder how the relevance of that with that when we have 2 directors.
Yeah.
Still need a proxy.
Well, that's right, and I suspect it potentially puts the directors in a difficult position of having actually voting as the shareholder. And I think it's cleaner to.
Okay, then I'd move that Deputy Chair Rick Barker is our proxy. Second.
Chair, can we just confirm that Councillor Barker is available?
Well, let's have an alternate.
13th of, what is it, November?
Yeah, Monday, 5:30.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm fine.
You haven't got difficult treaty negotiations that day, Rick?
It's in the morning. It's in the morning.
Okay, so I've nominated Councillor Barker to do that. Do we have seconder? Fenton? All those in favour? All right, right.
Do you want to appoint an alternate?
I think we should, because Rick could get crook or something. So, who would like to be the alternate? Have we got any volunteers? Who is? Oh, Paul. Who is it? Who is the youngest member here? Could be Fenton. It could be Debbie. We know it's not Mr. Moore or me.
So is it going to be Paul?
Yeah. Yeah. You just don't look at Fenton. You've had a harder life in those hills in Wirral. Paul's put his hand up to be the alternate. Do we have a? And I'll second it. So all those in favour of Paul being the alternate? Rick's not available. Aye. It's carried. Okay. Let's just record that. Proposed schedule. See,
Chair,
January's
so-
off, Debbie, so we can go to the beach on January, I see, the proposed schedule. The schedule, January, there's a nice blank.
So, Chair, following the last discussion on this, we've taken on board the Council's desire to continue to meet monthly with Council meetings, but we've spaced out the Regional Planning Committee to 6 weekly, just to manage workloads and also not have meetings for the sake of meetings. We've got a slightly heavier first half of next year, obviously, because of the long-term plan and a range of workshops and meetings leading into the finalisation of the LTP, and we've left a reasonable break in the middle of July for those that may wish to get away that time of year as well. So
Excellent.
it's what's proposed, and we're just seeking feedback and hopefully endorsement today so that we can lock this into diaries and start planning of work for next year.
Neil?
Oh, it was really in relation, Mr Chair, to the discussion with HBRIC, and sorry, I missed that. It was just a quick question around the SCI and the timing of that. Is there an annual report, annual general meeting element, SCI element? Is there an aspect of the annual report which includes consideration of the SCI?
No, that's all right.
So, Councillor, off the top of my head, the annual the year for HBRIC, I believe, is 30 June, 1 July year, as opposed to the port, which is 1 September from memory. And so we're past the SCI setting. So the SCI for HBRIC was for the current year we are now in was settled earlier this year, and so it would be up for renewal second quarter of next year, if you like. And typically, I seem to recall we do it as part of the annual, and aligned to the annual plan process.
We certainly need to sort of work and thinking around that. Absolutely. But okay, but we've just reverted back to another general item. Rick, we're on the meeting schedule.
Yes, could I just look at April? I see that Anzac Day falls on the 25th, Wednesday, and we put the council meeting on the Thursday. Could I suggest we have the council meeting on the Tuesday?
Can I make a comment? Personally, as staff, we've got no problem with that. We did debate, because Anzac Day is a Wednesday. People may take the opportunity, because it may be school holidays, to take either the Monday and Tuesday or the Thursday, Friday off. So we just plumped for one. But look, if you want to go for the Tuesday, I think we're fine with that, aren't we, Leanne? We just work our agenda deadlines around that.
Any thought on that? It's probably. God, you go on about these Saturdays, don't you? Eh?
No, I just thought if you put it on Tuesday, then it makes it. I just thought to me, the Tuesday, having Anzac Day on the Wednesday, works better as a construct than it did the other way around. That's just I thought.
I'm happy with that.
So to shift that council to Tuesday the 24th. Yeah.
We're just having suggestions here.
You were wanting to cut back on meetings. So why don't you just ditch July and January? Well, gives the staff meetings start back in January.
Well, look, January's all but clear anyway, and I do think we will need that council meeting. Look, there will be business over the summer period that we'll need to report on, and also while we're seeking your close to final direction on the shape of the LTP prior to Christmas, we'll be bringing you back a fully fledged budgeted proposal for the end of January, and I think just to make the rest of the timing fit, we do need to make some progress then. July, well, we've got ENS in there every second month, and we can possibly make a call if we don't have the volume of work to justify that meeting in early July. That could always go. But you did indicate that you do want a council meeting each month, so that's why there's one there in July too. But look, that provides a reasonable break.
Now, the other thing I was wondering about was workshops, and I note that we're not getting the regional workshops that we're used to. It's quite, I mean, if they're scheduled in, then the staff say, right, we're going to visit the Kiwis, or we're going to,
Right.
I don't know, Mahi or...
So we've got a number of reserve days peppered through the year. If you would like us to look at those in particular for visits, we can suggest some of those.
We can just Ken Reserve, can't we?
It adds to the regional appreciation, I think.
Yeah.
You should be doing.
We haven't made much progress, I don't think, with planning councillor visits out to the community. So that would seem like a useful way of using those reserve days. I'm not hearing any great objections.
I actually think we have. I think most of us are in the community all the time. You don't have to. They don't have to be a construct. We're there.
It's more
field days,
a structured field day that we would organise around council infrastructure or council services and activities.
Well, you can do those on reserve day, but
with science staff, etc. So.
I mean, Paul attended that field day out at Ahururi on the farm, didn't you? You didn't get to it.
Fenton got to it.
Fenton got to it. You know, and it's really important that we get to as many of those as possible. But anyway, you've got plenty of reserve days in there. Is there any more discussion? Because we can tentatively adopt this. Can we have a tentative adoption subject to? Yeah, so we can subject to change with discussion, because it's a moving feast, isn't it?
Tentatively subject to change.
Okay, we're going to move it in a second that we have a draft timetable here that we can stick into our diaries. All those in favour? All right. Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Yeah, we're moving on. Right, a late item that's not in your notes. We're saying we're going to do it now. So, Maori Committee Charter and Membership, yep, that is hot topic.
Sorry. Fixing the common seal. Sorry.
Okay, you go and get them and we'll fix the common seal. Well, I'm running on this new run sheet I've got.
They've been reversed, sorry.
Yeah. Mike will go and get them. So we'll do 9, fixing the common seal.
I'm not terribly associated with this. I want the chair to come out with the chains, the hat on, the big...
I've never worn those chains. Fenton only wore them once.
Not a problem, something medieval, explain publicly why I didn't wear them, Chair.
Yeah, no, you did tell me. Anyway, public would... Okay, James, do you want to just...
Look, there's little comment on...
Jessica.
There's a low level of freeholding going on with obviously just properties, but I think that reflects the slowdown in the property market generally at the moment. And then just one application for funding there around the Mad Mile project, which I think councillors are all familiar with.
Any questions?
So the Mad Mile is the stretch from the Maungatauteri Tamata Road intersection down to Craigie Range, where currently the the regional cycle network takes cyclists along a very narrow and dangerous piece of road, and we have managed to negotiate access with the landowners either side to put a cycle pathway in there, and we are seeking for that to be substantially funded by third parties. So we're in a fundraising effort, and there's an application through a pub charity, which needed our official
There's
says.
still some money in annual plan for that, isn't there?
There is, there is a modest contribution, I think 50,000 from memory from us, but the bulk of it will be funded from other parties.
Thank you. Do we have a second up? Ben, get your hand up there, mate. All those in favour? All right. Item 9 is completed. Here we come. We're going to have a big discussion. The Maoris are entering the room, is it? Mr. Mohi, I'm going to leave this. So this is a special item. And we'll hand the floor over to you, Mr. Mohi.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You want to give a background?
Kia ora koutou. This is about the Māori Committee Charter and membership. And basically, as to the paper there, is that this has probably been on the table for the last 12 months. There have been two issues that have been of concern to the membership themselves, and part of that has been the representation. That being that currently, or at least previously, it belonged to the Te Tai Whenua themselves, the four Te Tai Whenua, but we also started seeing the presence of the post-settlement governance entities, namely Mana Ahuriri and Maungaharuru Tangitu. And then the second one there was also looking at the strengthening the Māori Committee in their role as providing stronger strategic advice to the Regional Council within the decision-making process. And again, this was the committee looking at what their purpose was and what their role should be going forward with Council here. So as to the paper, there was much discussion over the last 12 months, including meetings that the Chair has attended with the Te Tai Whenua themselves. Some of those meetings were rather awkward. However, that was part of the process to land the charter. And so what you have before you is you have the final charter to which we seek adoption, clearly outlining that the seats themselves, the membership, do belong to the Te Tai Whenua themselves. The PSGs do have a place, but again, within the discussion, it was agreed that these belong to the RPC table at this point in time. And if you turn to of the attachment itself, working through that on page 3, you will see actually those areas that have been listed, which include 12 representatives nominated by the Tangata Whenua, and for them to be appointed at the Māori Committee each triennium, and these are nominated by each of the four Ngāti Kahungungu Tai Whenua and executive in this region. Are there any questions?
So just to alert you that in regards to the membership of the Tai Whenua, as Joyce Ann said, 3 from each of the four Tai Whenua. Now, there will be a challenge brought to the council here by Maungaharuru, probably the CEO and the representative on the Regional Planning Committee. And they object that they have not got a representative on the Tai Whenua, which is called Whanganui Roto. Now, this came about, the long story, the Runanga process was in the late 70s. I was a member of the Tai Whenua Tamatea at the stage. Peter Sharp was brought forward, presented to Ngāti Kahungunu, and it was agreed that the four Tai Whenua would send 3 representatives, would be part of the Māori Committee. In the early 90s, that committee was formed with the Regional Council. Now, 2 meetings ago at Opotama near Mahia, the Rungama Wahine representative objected strongly that they didn't have anybody representing them. And they were told via myself as a chair and backed up by the chair of the Tai Whenua that they needed to come to the Tai Whenua. And if they wanted to be selected, they needed to put their case forward as to whether they would be one of the three. But the strongest appeal has come recently from Maunga Haruru, saying that they are not represented on the Māori committee, even though they have, in George Reti, a person on the Whanganui Roto. About 7 or 8, probably 10 years ago, Whanganui Roto went into recess, and Maunga and Ahuriri stepped up to the plate and provided 3 members. A year ago, Maunga Haruru said, look, can we have one of those places? Ahuriri reluctantly agreed, and therefore we had 2 from Ahuriri and 1 from Tongoio, which is their marae. And then Whanganui Roto came out of recess again and said, we demand to have 3 as part of the Tai Whenua. I spoke to Tania. She said she's completely unhappy with that. I spoke to Ahuriri, and we worked out a deal with Ahuriri that they would step back and allow the 3 delegates to come from the Tai Whenua as was proposed initially and was the rules. So I've just a long-winded explanation, just trying to alert you that you will get something from Tania and perhaps Shane Walker saying, look, we want to be represented. That's not what it's about. There's the treaty groups there that are represented under the Regional Planning Committee, and this is the Tai Whenua representing the marae of from Wairoa to Tamatea and the 2 in between. Tania's group is associated through George Leti. He's a member of the Tai Whenua, but she says that because they are out there on their own, she doesn't understand why they can't officially have a seat on the Maori committee. And I said, well, it doesn't follow the charter. Hence, we've been 12 months debating this.
So what's your view on their view that the Tai Whenuas represented by the marae represent the marae, but they only represent the land and buildings, not the people, and that the people, this is what was put to me, but the people are represented through the treaty claimant groups?
That's a bit of a puzzle.
I'm just asking.
Yeah, Māoris will never be satisfied on who's representing them. When Parakura Horomia was representing the whole of the East Coast and the South Island, nobody stood up and said, you're not representing me. But when you start chopping it into these committees, you'll always have somebody saying, they don't represent me. So that's one of the reasons why I very seldom make a press statement saying I represent Māori in Hawke's Bay. That would be the part of my demise.
I might be able to help you here. The thing is that this starts a long way back with the treaty negotiations. There was quite a heated debate within the Crown and within Māoridom who was an iwi and who was a hapu, and how the definition was. In the end, no one could agree. Because someone would point to them and say, well, you're a hapu. The other said, no, we're an iwi, you're a hapu. And these arguments went on and on. So in the end, there was agreement to create this new thing called a large natural grouping. And it's a large natural grouping, and the large natural grouping identified it for themselves. Who their tipuna was, that they all whakapapa to, the area they represented, and their hapu. And this was for the purposes of negotiating a treaty settlement with the Crown. And that was it. The Crown does not recognise the LNG as representing Mana Whenua. Does not say Mana Whenua. Does not. Very clear about that. And who people identify themselves is entirely up to them. So this is a large natural grouping, which we'll talk about here, which has been formed for the purposes of negotiating a treaty settlement with the Crown, clearly defined. But that's the end of its purpose. And so that's in there, it's the answer. That's utility for that. We've got over here another entity, which is the Tai Whenua representing marae. And it's not saying that one speaks for the people and the other doesn't. But both speak for the people. They're just two different forums for two different purposes. And what we've done here is we've kept them quite separate, and I think sensibly so.
You know,
So-
sorry.
Is that right?
So with Māori, we think the large natural groupings is quite unnatural, so hence we have the arguments. In Tamatea, we have 9 marae, and we have meetings once a month. Nobody gets paid to come to those meetings, travel cost or anything, but we envisage that somewhere in the future we will morph into He Tōtaki Tini, which is the group with 100 million, and where we go. And where the rest of the 3 other tai whenua go will be up to them. But in the meantime, we're asking the council to endorse the charter, which was in place at the start, and after consultation, not everybody's happy, but this is what we're putting up.
So if I can just ask in relation to that, Mike, the fact that you're putting it up to us with a proposal that we adopt it must mean that the 12-month discussion you've had about Mangaharu Tangatu, that the other tai whenua believe this is the appropriate structure.
Yes, they do. It was the only one that we had the discord with. Oh, and Rongamawahine haven't been over verbal, but they do bring it up every now and again. And when Fenton's auntie comes here, what's her name? Rose Petty? Pauline, she brings it up, yeah, and said, why aren't you paying that fellow more money at the end and giving him a vote? Pretty to be. So the other part of the paper deals with the Māori constituencies. Sorry.
No. You and I are signing this, so you're asking council to okay the signing, you and I signing this charter, and then it'll be in. So let's just deal with the charter, and then we'll get on to the representatives. Any other comments around the charter?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Alan.
Just in relation to page 8, maintain one position on each of the regional councils committee, namely Environment Services, Corporate Strategic Regional Transport. I'd just like to note that the Transport Committee, Brian, is a very valuable member, but he doesn't have a vote because the Transport Committee is constrained by legislation. He's an advisory member.
So thank you, Alan, and he has been. He's very interested in the roading and the rail. Also, the Regional Planning Committee asked if they could have, this is the last 12 months, if they could have one member on the standing committees, whereas the Māori Standing Committee had 2 members. So that was sort of part of the coalition deal, as it were. So we withdrew one of our members, so we spread the load and the knowledge as wide as we could. We thought it was a reasonable request. And the second part, the constituency, is not going to be talked about. I was just told by my manager here.
Okay. Yeah. No, we've got to deal with this very important issue here. Neil?
Just ask at the terms of reference for those respective committees, does it reflect this rearrangement to a Māori committee representative and an RPC representative? Is that, have we changed that? I just can't recall.
No, we haven't.
Yes, we have. Yes, we did when the
We did?
committee terms of reference were adopted after the election.
They were included in RPC.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Debbie?
Is merging the roles, the actual RPC role, into what the Māori Committee, and I see them both separate, is that just confusing the RPC?
No, I don't think so.
They've got statutory requirements, haven't they?
Yes, but having them on the standing committees is just, I just see it as a sensible thing rather than just one committee the criticism from Regional Planning Committee was we had all the knowledge and we had all the meetings, and they ended up not knowing what was going on. So to help that process, we said, well, you send one to those committees, so you'll have a wider, and also the chairs ex officio, they can go to the meetings anyway.
And do the members from the Maori Committee get paid the same as the Regional Planning Committee when they attend the meeting?
No, they don't, but that's not part of this scenario.
Something that's getting picked up in the remuneration review that's currently underway.
And they're just happy with the lunch.
Paul, you would move.
No, I was just a question, Chair. You've obviously given this great thought, seems as though you'll be signing part of it. You're more happy with the recommendation that's been put up?
I am, and I'm happy to move it because I do see these two committees as being very separate functions. I've valued being on both, and I think you can see the different players. I agree, and I have listened to Mangaharu's point of view, and but in the final analysis, I think that this comes from the maraes, which is the people, to the tai whenuas, and we have 4 tai whenuas. We have 2 very strong ones, and 2 ones that aren't quite as strong, but they can grow under this scenario, and so I think this is a really good democratic process. So I would move the recommendation, and I'm happy to sign the document.
I'll second it.
Going to second that, Councillor Barker. Anyone else wish to speak? All those in favour? Aye. Against? Unanimous. When do we sign? When do I know?
We'll just get the hangi going and we'll tell you the date.
Okay. So item 11, regional, oh no, it's a financial one, isn't it? 10, report to regional planning, we've got a different run sheet here. So where was that? Page 25, yeah. So I'll report on the recommendations of the Regional Planning Committee. We had 3 major things really. We had the report from Tank, and we accepted, and their timelines. We had an update on the water conservation order, and I think we got some clarity, some interesting different clarity on that. And Central Hawke's Bay Community Delegation presented to us, and we got a really good, I thought that was particularly good, gave us a good insight into some of the issues there around Plan Change 6. There were no moving items, were there? Decision-making items? No. Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. Second that, Peter. All those in favour? All right. We do that financial planning
Yep.
annual plan.
Thanks. So this is just an information paper in terms of providing a financial update for the first quarter of the financial year that we're currently in. To date, there are no significant variances to budget, although we have highlighted here that there are a number of items that potentially will come up in terms of spend which we haven't budgeted for. In terms of, we don't have a close feel on what those costs are likely to be at the moment, yet to be determined. So we are proposing that we do a full reforecast after 6 months at the end of December, in terms of bringing those items into the forecast and ensuring that we cover those either out of existing cost savings or coming to you in terms of if funding is required. But at this stage, no significant variances, and if if there are any questions. Banton's here as well in terms of answering questions.
So perhaps I could just elaborate a little bit on the water conservation order. So at the moment we have lawyers working on our behalf, and we also have a range of external experts in water quality matters and ecology and what have you, preparing evidence on our behalf alongside our own expert staff. And so there is internal billing time against this project, and as well as external consultancy expenditure. Those are being drawn from the budgets that sit for those purposes generically right now, but they whether or not we exceed the budget allocations in those areas will be dependent on whether the work we had planned, which is most particularly around tank but not only, continues at the pace and volume that had been forecast, and if it does, we'll run a deficit in order to support the effort on the water conservation order, and that will just fall to the bottom line at the end of the year, for which we'll have to undertake a little bit more borrowing. However, if the displacement on our business as usual activity is so great that we don't get to do a bunch of things that we plan to do, then we may come out with a more neutral final position at the end of the year. Either way, there is a displacement either on the work we intended to do or financially on the organisation as a consequence of not having a standing provision for things like water conservation orders that require an awful lot of staff and expert time and cost, but for which we don't believe we can be absent or not participate in.
I have some questions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, don't know who to look to. I guess, firstly, to you, Jess, we need to think about revaluation of our essential asset, given. So we need to start to give some thought around that. I don't want to comment from you, but clearly we have a severely undervalued asset on our balance sheet. Mm-hmm. So, and if we wanted to do some other things. Financial assets, is that easily liquidated assets? When you say financial assets, that's 74 mil, 73 mil?
Yeah, so basically term deposits.
Essentially
So
cash.
Yeah.
I thought we only had 66, so. that was pleasant.
some are for other reserves, so it's
Okay.
not just that pool. That's
But
for
easily
things.
turned into cash.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm obviously with the weight.
And then the
some
cash down
time,
here, cash on hand.
So that's cash, yeah.
So,
I think he's referring to that one.
Yeah, so it's
oh
just
no, I'm talking about current assets, financial asset, yeah.
yeah. So they're all cash, just various timing
Right.
on when they mature, basically. Yeah.
7, 8 mil, we could liquid.
Yep.
Okay, so the 7 million movement in on the balance sheet movement, that's essentially the write down, is it? We've got a big movement in accounts receivable, so it's a bit meat in the sandwich. But the bottom line, we have a $7 million movement in 3 months.
Yeah, and as you said, sorry, most of that is accounts receivable. So there's obviously a lot of stuff that goes through in that last portion of the last year.
So it's not the write down; it's accounts
It's
receivable.
not the write down, so that's already factored
It's a
in.
mixture of all the other things.
Yeah.
So it's just really movement like that, and the other movement that hasn't come through yet is that as at 3 months we hadn't invoiced yet for our rates.
Okay.
So that comes in 1st of October, and so that changes the balance sheet a little bit as well, because obviously
It's actually, if you're not looking at the balance sheet on an annual position, most of it's due to timing.
No, it's quite a big movement in 3 months.
it is, yeah. And whether this is the best way to show it, I'm not sure. If comparison to this time last year, maybe the best. Paul had
Yeah.
different ideas, so
Yeah.
we're more. That may be the best
So
to
this
get the
doesn't really
timing out.
account for timing issues, really.
Yeah, there's not. So I mean, bottom line is the balance sheet really hasn't changed at all since you signed it off this morning for last year. But yeah, it's just a little bit of accounts receivable, payable, some accruals that get reversed and bits and pieces.
Okay. Are there any other questions to the accounts? The 3 months accounts? Okay, then do we have a mover to accept the accounts for the 3-month period? Neil? Paul? You on? Second? No one wants to speak? All those in favour? Aye. We'll receive the accounts. Chairman's report. You will. I'm sorry, we would have got it late. I just want to continue to talk about the WCO. The more I look at it, the madder I get, of course, as most of you know. But I have talked to quite a few of the landowners, and they're reported there. It's significant that none of the landowners that I've talked to in the upper reaches have believe they have been consulted. None believe that, none of them want it. So I think that's quite telling. You can read through it. Has anyone got any comments?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank you and the other councillors who were involved in that consultation, because it makes it far easier for us to maintain and validate our position.
It does.
And so I think you've done very well.
Thank you, Al.
And the result is very clear.
Yeah, it was a really interesting meeting, especially the Ofakari Trust and Ngāmatea. We met them together. They really feel that their rights as guardians of the river are being usurped by the Water Conservation Order. A really interesting meeting with the Timahanga people, because Jack Roberts has been a bit of a legend in our society for a long time. They are quiet, really nice people, and they've given 4,000 hectares of land to QE3 Trust. So these are serious conservationists over the last 100 years, and all of these people have been landowners. The Pākehā has been landowners for over 100 years, and of course the Maori's been there for 600 years, and they see themselves as guardians of this lake, and amongst them they have 60 kilometres of the river.
Also, Mr. Chair, the Oko blocks that are divided into Māori ownership, excuse me, three of the blocks have signed a reserve status under the Reserves Act, and a fourth one has got a 10,000 hectare project pending the new government. So a total of 40,000 hectares of Māori owned land under 4 trusts will be protected under the Reserves Act. So the question from one of the chairmen to me after they met with Rex is, so what does this kawanata, which is a covenant, mean that we signed with you 15 years ago? And I said, well, I'll give you his phone number.
Yeah, no, they were deeply offended, and one of them actually said, so the minister's word means nothing. And so it was a very compelling, and it was good to have He Takatini there, because I think they saw another side of the story. I put in this, and it's quite controversial, I guess, in point 13, that it is my view that the WCO contravenes Hito Takatini's rights, Mana Ahuri's rights under the treaty, and worst of all, or not worst, but more compelling, is all the treaty rights, because the RPC. So it usurps, in my view, the authority of the RPC, and because, why do we have the RPC, and why are we having this treaty partnership when we can have a group of people just go over the top of it and do something entirely different, which we are then obliged to refer to. So we either have one process, and I guess that just encourages the argument that the WCO is an antiquated version of the way we manage our environment, and it's just been used by a group of people to get their personal agendas through, despite what the rest of the community are doing and think. So I don't want to go on about that. It's dominated my life. I want to just say that it has actually been a distraction. Because, you know, if you're fighting this battle, you're not doing the other things that you should be doing. Although I have to say, I've had a great enjoyment in meeting those three people in the upper reaches of the river. All those meetings were wonderful meetings, and some of you councillors attended them, and you would have seen that as well. Plan Change 6. You know, we've had quite a lot of discussion on that, and Central, and everyone knows that I'm personally in favour of giving those farmers some time. Not all councillors agree with me, I recognise that, but I think that there's going to be continual discussion on that. But whatever we do, we need to bring the rest of the community with us, especially the environmental community. So, because we don't want to end up in court over it if we do something. So, I think it's as we were. It's just going to be a slow approach, but it needs to be coordinated. Yes.
On that point, I was told yesterday that there will be a set of recommendations coming to the RPC meeting on November 1st with regard to the so-called sort of plan change light that is being contemplated for Plan Change 6, and included in that will be a recommendation regarding the time frame of some of the provisions. So there will be an issue on the table at that point.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, who's that coming from?
It's coming from staff.
All right?
Coming from staff.
From the staff, thank you.
And look, I can confirm that a meeting has been held with Fish and Game and Forest and Bird representation in the last few days in relation to that, and it's constructive conversation. They're continuing to give consideration to their position in relation to any delays to implementation of the plan.
Okay,
It was at this stage, yes.
Thank you. So the workshop with the regional mayors, I just wanted to mention it again because there's been a bit of email traffic around about it. People have quite diverse views, but perhaps we need to come to a point on this, and perhaps we might be able to do it this afternoon. I don't know if it's on our agenda or not, but it's still unresolved. Matariki Reds, as you know, I put up a new governance management proposal with the support of the Mayor of Wairoa, and it's generally been accepted, and it's just going through a process now of getting across the line, but it's much more, it's a governance structure with all the mayors, the five mayors, which includes the chair of the regional council, and 5 Tana Te Whenua representatives. They are working out how they're going to do that. We put a proposal, what we thought would look easy and good, but essentially the Tana Te Whenua have to work that out for themselves, and 5 business. And we'll have a management structure underneath that, which is the CEOs, the respective CEOs. So that's just moving along. I'd like it to move along a bit faster, and I had a discussion with Wayne yesterday, and he's quite keen to get it resolved as well. Pokawa Lake, whilst it wasn't identified as a hotspot, it is of course pretty essential because it's the headwaters of the Karamu, and it's quite controversial. Last month we reported that James and I met with a group from Te Hawke. It was a very successful meeting, and we resolved that we would talk to the landowners, so we subsequently had a meeting. Debbie and Mike attended with us. I thought it was a very successful meeting as well. And the resolution is, it's very intertwined, so the landowners, or the Te Hawke marae, are essentially the landowners of the land around the lake, and they lease it to the Brownrigg brothers. So they don't want that income affected, but they want a good lake. The Brownriggs are exactly the same. They want to carry on farming, but they have very deep roots into that lake, and they talked about that as kids and boys jumping around the lake. So there's no doubt about it. They are all very connected, basically we said, well, you fix it. You come to us, you tell us how you're going to fix it to meet our standards. We want certain standards, but you come to us with a solution, and let's get on with it. So, I don't know, we haven't done anything about coordinating that, but James and I have to talk about how we actually ensure that that happens, because quite often, sometimes you do these things and then nothing happens. So, I think they were all very focused on they needed to do something. Certainly the Brown rigs realised, that they wanted the lake to be as good as it could be, and the Tangata Whenua, with mostly Te Hawke, wanted it also. Someone else may wish to comment on that. Debbie was at the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Does that, was part of that discussion around the issue we've got with the Hawke Plan Change 5?
It is involved, but the discussion wasn't, no.
Oh, look, it was raised in passing, really, and we're waiting for resolution from the Environment Court on Plan Change 5. I'd made the observation in the meeting that Plan Change 5 and the court's final position on it won't settle the issues we have around the management of the lake more broadly. It really goes to just issues of definition of the perimeter of the lake. But the lake does have issues in terms of water quality, which will be triggered as part of the tank plan change. So there is a body of work to do around the lake's longer term management. Part of our challenge right now at staff level is just working through resourcing that in the context of the overall tank plan change, because there are a number of water bodies in the tank catchments that also require management alongside everything else that we're doing. But I'm reasonably optimistic that a focus on the Karamu, including the headwaters and including Lake Pukawa, will lead us to a concerted body of work around those connected water bodies in the near term.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, it was a good meeting. The Pukawa marae are just one of several major Māori landowners, including my hapu, which at least is 2,000 hectares to Brown rigs. Brown rigs are held in very high regard. However, the Te Hawke marae land area is the responsible trustee for that is the Tumu Pairoa, which used to be the old Māori trustee. And I think they're just a little bit out of step with the advisory trustees from the marae. So James got via the last temporary CEO, a very nasty letter from the responsible trustees, which was a little bit out of step. However, the Tangata Whenua are very happy that the council, i.e. Rex and the CEO, and one or two others, will come to the marae to discuss the problems about pollution. At the other end of the 10 k's down the road is the Peka Peka swamp, and 80% of the sediments, nitrates, can I say nitrates? Nitrates are actually held in that swampland, that wetland. So it just gives you an idea how important wetlands are in terms of cleaning up waterways. And I do a lot of riparian plants, etc., and I have to agree with Dr. Mike Joy. Planting riparian strips is actually not going to be the golden bullet. It's wetlands, like the Raupo at Peka Peka.
Before I go on, you've got a question. I just want to thank Mr. Moe for adding to my chairman's report. That was very good. Thank you. Councillor
Deputy Vice
Rick, you going to put something on that subject on Pukawa?
No, I was coming back to Matariki and Reds, and I just think that it's going to be a time for us to rethink, given the government's intention, new government's intention to invest substantial sums of monies into regional developments, that we have a red strategy based on a very thin rule coming out of Wellington to try and make it go a lot further. And of course we have a structure to deal with that. Well, we've got now something which is substantially different. This is more than just a gear change, and we may have to rethink, how we manage that in the light of that. So I just think it'd be time for Matariki and this group to rethink the structure and what might be, because I wouldn't want us to carry on with the same process if we've got something different, unless we've thought our way through it and made sure it's entirely appropriate.
Well, thank you, Rick. I mean, the proposal, which essentially come from me but were sorted by other people, by the iwi and by Wairoa strongly, was based around that very concept that the governors of the region needed to advocate for the region at a political level. So they didn't have to do the job, but they had to do the advocacy for the region. So that's what it was. That's what the change is, really. My last point, I had a meeting with Hanari Ratama. His family owned some of the land at the northern end of Tūtera, and they also owned some lake bed, about 10% of the lake in a straight line, including that little island. He's very passionate about his land, Hanari. He doesn't get on with anybody else up there. And he wants to set up a native species habitat in his section of the lake, and you can imagine the complexities of that. And yeah, that's just part of his passion, and I actually enjoy his company, and because of his passion. But there are some complexities in Tūtera around relationships that we somehow have to overcome. Just on one other quick thing, because I note here James and I met Mana Haruri. We're meeting them very regularly, and that's been hugely successful, with James and I meeting them and just working through the issues. We're both, in the first instance, very conscious that we've got to get that governance board, which we're appointing Neil to, up and running. They're frustrated, we're frustrated, because it needs to happen. Paul and I visited one of the drains that goes to Aharuri, and I must say I felt like I was in China. So there are big issues there, and we know the health issues that have come out from people collecting shellfish there recently, and you can see why. So I'm really looking forward to that governance board really cranking up and getting going, and they're focused. It's just taking a bit of time, and it's taking a bit of frustration, and Neil's chomping at the bit to get going. But it's going to take a bit of time. But I think those meetings that we have are very good. The last one, Paddy Prince actually spent some time, said, I don't want to go into grievance, but I'm going to tell this new young chief executive. And he did, James, didn't he? And it was marvellous. Gave us a bit of the history of Aharuri, what happened, and it was a tremendous meeting. So are there any questions on anything else there? That was a bit of a quiet month, really, to be honest. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I suppose I should have brought this up as a minor item, but are we going to get a report back? I know we got an email from, I think it was from Ian, about the shellfish issue and from the people getting crooked through there, and trying to get to the source of that, which we're not too sure about. Do you know, James, if we're going to receive any formal report on that?
So Liz has just reminded me, yes, there's advice coming to the RPC, presumably. Is it next week, our RPC meeting? Yes, it is.
RPC's next week. It is a follow-up item for the Regional Planning Committee, because that's the one that it went to first.
Yep.
Any other questions? Do we have someone to move to accept that report? Fenton, you can this time, since you wouldn't last time. Fenton will move. I didn't say anything offensive about Wairoa this time. Fenton moves. Rick seconds. All those in favour? Aye. Okay, just accept the report. Number 12. Oh yes, activities.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I won't go through it in great detail, but just at the headline level, staff are heavily engaged in science and in policy and planning, and the tank plan change. We've got an increased frequency of meetings leading up to Christmas, and we're driving that process as fast and as hard as is achievable, both within our resources and within the capacity of our stakeholders to move things through. So making good progress there. We've also got simultaneously science and policy and planning staff working on the WCO evidence, and we'll be into the first round of hearings in a fortnight when the tribunal commences on the 14th of November. Plan Change 6 implementation continues to be the focus for our land management staff, and lots of work on the ground, but also lots of work for our science. There is a science program obviously underpinning Plan Change 6 which continues. Just note that in the coastal hazard space, the panels have continued to meet, and there has been hive of activity, but we're now coming down the home straight in terms of the funding options, which we'll talk about in our workshop this afternoon, but good progress there. The hotspots are all running along at various stages of planning or beginning implementation. Possibly the one we're waiting on most there is the management committee in Ahuriri to be convened, and while there has been in principle an agreement to get that committee convened, as I understand it, Napier City Council still haven't set a date for the inaugural meeting. Biosecurity, the consultation's underway at the moment on the refresh of the regional pest management plan. And a relatively steady stream of work in the consents and compliance space as well. So busy across the board, but no great surprises. I think councillors are reasonably well sighted on the majority of that work. Happy to take any questions.
Neil? Neil, then
well, thank you.
We'll go
thank
around.
you, Mr. Chair. I do want to go to the hotspots and the Ahuriri one in particular. I know it was referenced in terms of the RPC. It was my recollection, however, that we had in fact raised that at council level as well. And I think it's such an issue that needs to find its way into a council action point as well. So if I thought it had.
Sorry, Councillor, can you clarify what's the action you're referring to?
We're needing to be. This is a hotspot that needs its close attention and focus on at a council level. I thought it was from our meeting, our last council meeting. You've just advised that it's an RPC.
No, sorry, I was referring to the Ahuriri Management Committee having not convened, and we're waiting on that committee to be convened by Napier City Council. That was the comment.
Well, okay.
Yep.
Having said that, then I don't feel as though the council and me as a representative in Napier is all over this issue, particularly in regard to the contamination, and I would like to have seen very substantive focus by this council on it, or at least what has been done being very explicit around it. And is there a further update that can be given now in regard to the contamination issue?
Look, I don't have any further information other than what's been provided to date, which is that obviously the DHB is leading this investigation. We're providing science support. There is a thesis that the contamination is most likely to have been recently deposited in the estuary and most likely to have come from an illegal discharge from a vessel or vessels moored in the marina, which they are not under maritime regulations allowed to do, but has been an informal practice by some vessel owners. Works going on with Napier City Council and the Napier Sailing Club, that are the two owners of the two marinas there, around ensuring that all boat owners understand legal obligations and that is not allowed to occur again in the future. Whether or not the science has definitively demonstrated that is the source, we will try and provide you with some further advice on that next week. But that's the status of the issue at the moment, and we don't have the staff present today to give you the detail, and as I said, it is planned for next week.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. At our last meeting, Mr. Chair, I was very hesitant to make any comment until the science had been delivered. It was delivered, and I agree with your assessment that it's indeterminate as to whether the source is at the port end or whether it's higher up. So I think we need to be very clear with the public in particular about our investigations as to the causes.
Just as a point of interest in regard to that, does our harbour master have jurisdiction or any rights in regard to moored vessels in a harbour?
Look, he does, although typically this is work that would be conducted directly by our pollution response or compliance officers in terms of following up with individual vessels. But yes, he has powers in this regard too. We haven't historically undertaken inspections and compliance activity around vessels in there. It's a relatively large and labour-intensive job to do that on an ongoing basis, and it hasn't been prioritised. So public education has been the method to date, but obviously this incident does call into question whether that's adequate. And as I understand it, there are options around requiring tamper-proof seals on vessels, but that requires an entire compliance regime around it to ensure they're being checked on an ongoing basis and that disposal's happening in the right place, etc.
One would think that.
So that is that's on the table for discussion, and it partly relates to the conversation we're having this afternoon around our level of resourcing and compliance generally.
Sorry, can I just finish off? Can I just finish? I would have thought that all moored vessels it would be essential for them to have self-containment in terms of, grey water, black water, and that should be policed.
Well, certainly that it would be very unlikely that anyone is discharging directly from their on-vessel toilets into the harbour. What's possibly happening is either they're being poorly maintained and there is leakage, or a vessel owner is deciding to not steam out to the and I think from memory it's 500 metres or something like that. Maybe further than that. There is a distance that is required under maritime regulations offshore to be before disposing into the ocean, or using. I couldn't tell you definitively, but quite possibly. And it's probably relatively commonplace for vessels travelling great distances offshore, But there is the option, obviously, of having them pumped out by a suitable provider, just like a septic tank is cleaned. And it may well be that people are avoiding cost and hassle here by just quietly discharging when the tide's going out, possibly into the marina area, which is obviously totally prohibited, and boat owners are aware of those obligations. You've got to catch somebody in the act. That's the other challenge with this. So it's not an easy issue to resolve.
Can I just perhaps add something there that Napier City Council, as the owner of the marina, can actually change that situation just by altering the agreements that they have with the boat owners to ensure that they're actually making a requirement that they're sealed. So no, it's not the case at the moment. So Napier City the District Health Board is working with Napier City Council to look at changing that.
Just to answer Alan's question about the powers of the harbour master, unbelievably powerful powers. Can order a boat offshore immediately and you have to go. If you don't move, they can get you towed. They have more powers than a police officer on the road. They have unbelievable powers. There's no shortage of power in the harbour master.
Any more discussion on this? Clearly, if the science points to the boats, we have to do something about it. I mean, I know it's hard, James, but we have to toughen up all the regulations around the boats if that's the case. if it's proven that's the case.
Well, Mr. Chair, with the boat source is a likely source, but it's not the only source. And the point where I'm coming from is that I need to see urgency from this council in promoting, for example, the use of harbour master powers or some other remedies that demonstrate that we are serious about this. I mean, the next time someone will die, and will we end up with a situation such as Havelock North?
No, it's bad enough as it is. That's, we're going around town. Unless it's something to do with that artery estuary. Tom's waiting patiently here.
Yeah, no, sorry, Chair, just to follow on from Councillor Curtin's comments, is that I would treat this, I'd like to see staff treat this issue around what's happening with the boats and the moored boats in a similar manner to what we've had to do with feedlots, because at the end of the day the result's the same sort of thing. So it's about saying we'll give you the go ahead to have a crack at someone, and if they find someone that's doing something silly, well then they need to be, the message needs to go out there in no uncertain terms.
Thank you. Tom.
Well, actually, I had three questions about the report, but this conversation that we've been having just triggers another question, I guess. I'm really confused as to, Councillor Curtin keeps raising or expressing increasing agitation that we're not on top of Ahuriri stuff. You keep referring to having meetings of murky nature with time things and people won't make appointments and blah, 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 blah. So I guess I do have a question. On the one hand, like we identified Tutira as a hotspot. There are clearly things happening. We see trees being removed. We see bubblers bubbling, so forth. All we hear on Ahuriri, meeting after meeting, is we're working on meetings. So can somebody actually clarify what's the logjam here?
So look, I can give you a very straight answer on that. The difficulty we have with Ahuriri is that we are not the secretariat of the committee, that is Napier City Council.
The secretariat of what committee?
The committee which is ostensibly going to be provided in statute for the management of Ahuriri, which is the treaty settlement with Mana Ahuriri. So the Crown has said that the management of the Ahuriri estuary going forward is going to sit under the auspices of a management committee chaired by Mana Ahuriri, which we will have representation on, which Neil has been delegated to represent us on. But that committee has not yet met and is not up and running at this point in time. And so we're somewhat constrained in that regard.
And it's up to somebody at Napier City Council to get that ball rolling?
That's correct. And I've had several conversations with Napier City Council about the fact that, we want to get going, and ostensibly they want to get going as well, because obviously they've got their master plan, which they presented to the Regional Planning Committee on recently. So there is an intent, but for whatever reason, the committee has not yet met.
So for the public record, since this is a public meeting and it's being videotaped, can I say that the Ahuriri master plan is a scam that is distracting us from actually getting anything done to clean up the Ahuriri estuary? And when is somebody going to hold the Napier City Council to account for that?
So, Councillor, look, one of our challenges here is that we're not in control of this environment to the extent we are at Lake Tutira, for example. If we want to get control of it, then we're talking about a plan change. And we're talking about having to put into the Regional Resource Management Plan a range of limits, regulations, and that is how we get control of an environment. Now, obviously, Ahuriri is part of the
I understand what the legalities are, but I would just say to our chairman has spent incredible number of hours sweating over the WCO, which is like arguing over who declared war, World War I. I mean, it's happened. And I'd like to see our chairman get up on the pulpit and slam his fist on the table and say, what are you guys doing at the Napier City Council about Ahuriri? That's what our chairman is supposed to be doing.
Can I just, thank you. I have a slightly different view from James here, because I think that the governance board, which has not actually in statute yet, is in control of the estuary. The Napier City Council are just the secretariat of that board. And on that board, Mana Ahuri have the chair, and that chair is going to be Barry Wilson, and they have a couple of players and they on it as well. We have one representative, which is Neil. Napier City Council have one, and Hastings have one, and Dock have one. That group will control this estuary. Napier's just a secretariat to it. That group is in charge. And when they decide what they're going to do, and I am equally frustrated, and part of our meetings with Mana Ahuriri, and our next meeting with them was we have to move before it's in statute. They're waiting. But last meeting we had with them was, can you please get on with this? So it is frustrating because people are getting sick, and it's just not a good look. It's just not a good thing that's occurring there. So unfortunately that is the process, and it's down to that committee, the governance committee. So I could yell at Napier as much as I like, but I've done that and it didn't go down that well.
Question, can you confirm that the legislation for this committee has not yet passed through the House?
That's correct. It
And
hasn't been
therefore,
introduced.
that the committee in itself does not actually exist?
Well, it doesn't exist in statute. It can always be informally
So therefore,
convened, but councillor,
therefore it's an informal committee.
look,
and
that's
therefore it's
absolutely
got,
correct.
And therefore it's got the limitations of an informal committee. So,
As I understand it, the legislation is on hold pending an investigation by the Waitangi Tribunal in relation to the Mana Ahuriri's legitimacy of their claims. So it could actually be some time before A, that's resolved, and B, legislation passes through the House. So in the meantime, we just need to crack on, and I've just had a message from Mr Maxwell advising that we do have a dedicated full-time land management staff person that's been put onto the Ahuriri estuary catchment, and they are currently working on this this plan, if you like, which we will be bringing to the Ahuriri Management Committee table as our contribution, much like Napier City is. But that will focus on farmland surrounding. Here's Mr Maxwell now. And it will be less about the stormwater issues which we're going to have to deal with through a regulatory framework as opposed to a land management framework.
again, so just responding to Tom, this is not, what was it, a fraud or a deception or something? Scam. Something to, the issue here isn't that it's a scam, it's just that we're in an implementation phase, and that we can't go and do anything too extreme because we know this is coming down the tube at us, but the people don't have the structure is in statute now to get on with it, and it's informal. So therein lies its problem. It's just we need to understand.
All I was referring to, Councillor, was that on 2 occasions now I've seen a terrific slide presentation of all these wonderful plans for the Ahuriri waterfront, presented by consultants from Auckland and so on and so forth. And meanwhile, people are getting sick, and so I look at all of these grand redesign plans as basically fluff that is distracting us from actually getting on with trying to identify some problems, hold people accountable for them, and fix them.
A question: does the jurisdiction of this management committee for the Ahuriri estuary, does their catchment include seaward of the bridge into the inner harbour? It does. Good.
Chair, the thing about this, Mr Chair, sorry James, is that irrespective of the machinations of the committee and its formation, etc., this council can get on and do things, and I think we ought to, with all haste, deal with those issues and be seen to be dealing with them. It's only an email to the respective players to let them know we're doing it.
I agree with that. I think perhaps we should form a little group and of councillors and especially the NAPE councillors, and try and do as much as we can before, because if it takes a year, we just can't wait a year. We just can't. And so I didn't realise that they were being challenged, and that was the hold up. But we need to talk to them about that and say, look, we do need to get on it, and I think they'll be conscious, and perhaps we bring in the person that they're nominating as chair into that small group and say what we're going to do in the interim, because we just can't wait.
Chair, I would like to just note, though, that the master plan that Napier City Council's put forward, they've got to take through their long-term plan process before they can then make the investments that they are proposing. With respect to the stormwater and the overflow in times of high flow of their wastewater, this is 100+ years of engineering that we're talking about having to reorganise. This Ahuriri estuary is not going to be fixed quickly. These issues are going to take time. As I said before, we have got a land management staff person dedicated to a plan with respect to the farming catchment. We are engaged with Napier City Council and the DHB on the most immediate issue, and we have deployed science resource in support of that. So, I don't think it's entirely fair to characterise us as doing nothing in the face of all of it. But I think it is important, though, that councillors are aware of how long this is going to take to turn around.
Chair, perhaps if I could just add one other thing that's happening and will be happening next month is that you will have seen in Anna's presentations as part of the hotspot proposal, the Whakapomatis, the marine fanworm invasion of the estuary. So there's work happening in mid-November to begin removal of that from the estuary. So there is stuff happening in the catchment, and it's happening today as we speak.
Thank you, Chair. On a different note, but on a similar sort of topic, the Tyne Street discharge consent, which is in place already, but have we seen the management plan that was supposed to be presented to us earlier this year? Has it actually appeared out of thin air from Napier City Council yet?
When they appeared here, through you, Mr. Chair, when they appeared here, they indicated that they would have it to us by late September, and I would have to confirm with staff that they've received it. I haven't heard that they haven't.
Right, I would like to see that when it turns up. It'd be helpful, thank you.
I had three actually, but we're still on this subject. We're very generous with our time in listening to the mayor and the chief executive come in and, from Napier Council and take our time to talk about the aquarium and so forth. I don't see why we can't impose on their time to send a delegation to one of their council meetings and express our discontent with their management of the Ahuriri estuary. Anyway, back to the report. On item 20, refers to the FEMS in the Tukituki catchment. Ian mentioned yesterday that there's an announcement today or tomorrow. Something we're gonna say something about this, aren't we? Can you preview that to the?
So look, I'll find the publication material at lunchtime and give it to you. Basically, we're ramping up the socialisation of our kind of way we're going to approach farm plans in the catchment, recognising that May next year is socialisation, another word for marketing. We're communicating with our constituency on what we're going to do in terms of the farm plan deadline in May next year, which is looming. There are effectively three options. One is that you have your farm plan completed and it's banked. The other option is that you have your farm plan or your farm registered for a farm planner, with a farm planner to have that farm plan completed, but has not yet been done, i.e. capacity of the industry hasn't permitted it. Or option 3 is there will be some sort of regulatory action ranging from either the requirement to have a resource consent to farm in a reasonably challenging and comprehensive resource consent process to get through, or there may well be enforcement action taken. So it's three kind of stark contrasts. You've either done it, or you're in train to do it, or the other option is regulation will start to bite. And that's been communicated with people well in advance of May next year, so that come May next year for the the small part of the compliance triangle or community who haven't responded. They've had fair warning of what's likely to happen to them after that.
Thank you. My next question is related to 41. We're talking about 4,000, some kind of program to do land monitoring. 4,000, what is that? What is that? 4,000 individual land monitoring points.
So that's part of Barry Lynch's land or soil monitoring program. So it's just ramping up the number of sites at
We're
which
going
we
to have
do.
4,000 of them.
Ultimately, there will be up to 4,000. I didn't think it was 4,000. I'll just check and confirm with Barry that that's not a typo and it's not supposed to be 400.
I'm very impressed if it's
Yes.
4,000. I'd be impressed if it was 400.
Yes.
All right. And number 52 refers to processing the Tranche 2 water takes.
Thank you, Councillor. I was going to bring that up separately anyway, so because there has been an update since this agenda got put to bed. HBRIC met last week and have advised now that they have withdrawn their application for the Tranche 2 water, so it'll go through the process of the next applicants on the list.
And who's the next applicant? Is that Bostock?
There's a number of them, but the whole 15 million cubic metres would be taken up.
Has
could be
been
taken
applied
up.
for?
Yes.
And so we're now going to begin moving through those?
Yes.
Okay.
I've lost my one, but I will get it. Oh, there you go. Number 33, Waikopero Lake. Through to Mr. Maxwell. Bottom water oxygen has increased from 0 to 90% with the bubbler as of the 13th of October. When can we get I mean, that's an incredible change. When can we get a more in-depth report though? Like, I mean, how much influence does that have? You know, how far down the lake? Is that just directly below it, or is that in the furthest corner? And you know, simple things like what's this thing costing to run? You know, but a bit more meat on the bones.
Sure. So there's an update coming to the Environment Services Committee meeting. So we'll lay it all out then.
Oh, I had one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you do that. When you've got the hot spots there, I'm wondering if we can put Lake Hartuma on here as well, Ian or James, because when we went out to consultation, it was under the understanding that there'd be something done down in Lake Hartuma, and so I'm wondering what's happening down there as well.
Yep. So we've actually expanded it into the Tuki catchment, and we do have two discrete projects on the go there, which I'll add to the list.
To move that the report be received, Chair.
Second.
Aye. Aye. Just to advise the council that I went and approached the corrections department. That's both probation and the ones who look up to discuss with them their capacity to work with the regional council on tree planting programs and so on. This has happened before, but it has fallen away from time to time. It hasn't been well placed. They're very interested in working with the council. They have considerable resources, as you can well imagine. They have people on PD in Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay, around Napier and Hastings. They do want to get involved in running these things, and I thought what I might do is, as a result of my discussion with the write-up report, and submit it for council to think about, because this has quite significant ongoing benefits. They have the capacity, have done, raised plants and done that. We could do that again. We have these people leaving prison and coming out, and it would be an opportunity for them to be engaged in this work, is to get some on-the-job training, skills and so on, and help with the rehabilitation program. It's a whole pile of things, but they're only really interested if in fact we have a well-established ongoing program. which will require this council to put some investment into it and be part of a broader strategy. It's, in my view, quite exciting. So just to give you notice, I'll write up a report on this and put it through the system somewhere. We need to engage with this. It needs to be a political engagement at this council level, a commitment at that level, as well as at the operational level as well. So this opens up considerable opportunities for us.
Thank you, Rick. You're right, they used to do a lot of it. The only ones that is Marina's the only ones holding it together now. She makes scones for them. So she still gets them. Okay, Paul, Tutera and drinking water.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I attended the 6-monthly Tutera Mangahuru Forum presentation back to the Tutera community on what's going on. There were two things that haven't been reported on at the council. One was had a presentation from Niwa. They're managing the grass carp in the two lakes, and they told me that, or they told the group that there hasn't been the plant hasn't been seen for 2 years in the lake. So potentially in about 8 years' time, we may be making a decision about whether we continue with having grass carp in the two lakes. So that's a really encouraging sign. And the other thing which I really enjoyed with the meeting was that there were 3 kids from Tutera School attended, listening to a whole bunch of adults rabbit on for half a day. And they were really interested. The school the kids at the school apparently really enthusiastic about everything that goes on up there, and are really keen to get involved. And I found that really encouraging. We had the first meeting of the Joint Committee on Drinking Water yesterday, and there will be a terms of reference come back to this council for approval.
Oh, dare I say it? Whitebait.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been whitebaiting in the Tukituk River for the thick end of 60 years. When I first started going down, taken down by down to the river with my father with set nets, this was in the days before refrigerators. That's how long ago it is. And the local Maori people used to put up shacks on the side of the riverbank, and they would be there for the 3 months of the season. They used to catch kerosene cans full of whitebait. I'm sorry to say some of it ended up a surplus and ended up being used for garden manure. You could buy it for $1 a pound from them. They used to dry it on corrugated iron, because that was the only way they had to store it for any length of time. As you can imagine, things have changed a hell of a lot in the last 50 or 60 years. And in fact, even as short a time ago as 10 years ago, when I was whitebaiting, you could count on getting a meal at least every second time that you went out, and there wasn't a huge pressure on the resource. Even last season, some people tell me they caught some of their biggest catches ever, and there were 2 significant runs where people were catching 25 or 30 kilos of whitebait each day. This year is the worst year in my living memory for whitebaiting, and not just in the Tukituk. The same thing applies to a number of the rivers in Hawke's Bay. And I have no idea why that should be the case, but it's disastrous, and I don't know whether it spells the demise of the range of fish that are there, or whether it's because we had rain at different times earlier on in the year, which changed their life cycle and meant that the eggs got washed out to sea earlier and maybe came back into the rivers earlier. That's a possibility. But I think we need to do some work to just establish what the hell has happened this year and why it's such a disaster, because if it is a fact that the whitebait resources in this area have reduced significantly, we will have to take action, and that might mean having a moratorium for a year or 2. It might mean shortening the season. It might mean not allowing stands. There are a range of possible actions that we might have to consider taking, and I have no idea what controls we have, but I think we need some information about what the hell is going on, and I'd like to ask staff to look into it.
Thank you, Peter. How will I put this? It's a question to you. So my daughter, who's a member of Greenpeace, says they're endangered. Is that true?
On the evidence of what I've seen this year,
we're getting confirmation. Not on your
I would have
evidence.
said yes, but there is. I mean, you talk to some of the people down there, and they don't believe that's the case. And you even talk to some of the the conservation people that sit around the tank table, for instance, and they don't say that either. So there's a range of opinions about this, but it's very hard to argue with the evidence that I'm seeing. I've been probably whitebaiting 10 times in the mouth of the tookie talks this year, and I haven't caught a meal collectively in those 10,
So
10 visits.
If you could do a report for us, Ian, that would be most appreciated. Just a short one.
Perhaps just a bit of clarification, Chair. Just what we could do is bring you back just a bit of the legislative overview, because whitebait are actually managed in law by the Department of Conservation, but we obviously have roles and functions that intersect with their habitats. So that plus perhaps a kind of a 101 on what are whitebait and what their life cycle is, because some migrate to sea and then return and others live permanently in our rivers. And that'll perhaps give you a bit of a sense in where some of what we call the bottlenecks might be in the populations, whether it's in the marine phase or in stream.
And also whether there have been weather events that have changed their normal life.
So you'll come back to us.
Life patterns.
Ian will come back to us with a report, and I'm sure Paul will want it.
Because of this information, Peter Bevan's now going to have to give up whitebaiting.
No, he won't.
It's insider trading.
And some of them
can't be changed overnight.
And some of them will actually be endangered species as well that make up a juvenile.
Yeah, you're catching baby eels too. I'm watching you. Kohipariki.
Yes, I met with Whanganui Roto in Napier here a month or so ago, and one of the kaumātua said that from Kohipariki that he, as a kaumātua, had never been consulted about their stand in the water conservation order. That same kaumātua attended the last Maori committee as the new official representative from the Tai Whenua, and he stated publicly that at none of their marae committee meetings had the matter of the water conservation order been discussed.
Thank you, Mike. Subsequent to that, I have been invited to a special meeting that the Kohipariki Marae Committee are holding on this matter, and I will attend. Do we have another?
No,
That was it. Yeah, it's a bit extraordinary. Then we have no other matters, do we?
What's wrong with general business?
Well, we've had general business.
That's just quite right. So it's general business.
No, we're not having any.
People sit down and chair before
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I need to make an appointment with Anne Redgrave this afternoon and take Councillor Wilson with me just for some continuity while I'm away. Is there a time that I could do that in terms of the program you've got this afternoon?
That'll be quite good. We can talk about both you when you're away, Alan. That'll work well. We'll pick a crucial moment. No, I imagine straight after lunch you'll be fine to do that.
Right. So
yeah.
So the program this afternoon is what?
So we're going to run through a series of presentations from members of the executive in terms of the business cases that have been developed. To get further feedback on what you'd like to see on the 8th of November. So, but look, how quickly we get through that is dependent on how much discussion councillors want to have. So it may well be at the conclusion of that that there'll be time to go and see Anne, right, if you don't want to miss anything.
Okay, we'll break for lunch. Oh, and break for the meeting, actually. The meeting is over. Well done.
meeting closed.
Closed. Meeting is closed.
Cabinet list
We'll
is
have
out.